Is this past 24 hours a win for Biden or not?
I mean, it's hard to say anything that's happened within the last couple of weeks is a win for Joe Biden, but in the grand scheme of things, it probably is a win. I mean, Joe Biden's going to listen to the Chuck Schumers of the world, not the Brad Shermans of the world. The only person that's going to push him out are the top levels of the Democratic Party or his family and inner circle. He's made it clear that the so-called elites, as he called them, other lawmakers, donors, aren't really registering with him. And so he's soldiering on, and he's basically challenged all these Democrats to, come at him in an organized way or step aside and get behind his bid to beat Donald Trump.
And to be frank, there's just a limited amount of time for all of this to come together in one way or another. The Republican convention's next week, the Democratic convention's just 4 weeks after that. And realistically, once we get to that point, once the convention wraps, if he's the nominee at the end of that, it's kind of too late to have the conversation.
That's right. And one thing to look out for was that Democrats were looking to perhaps formally nominate Joe Biden as early as July 21st. That's when a committee for the DNC meets. There was this issue with Ohio about getting on their ballot. That's now been resolved, but there was some talk about doing it early. And it'll be interesting to watch whether the Biden folks press the DNC to put that stamp of approval on, because as you said, Kailey, once he's the nominee, they can't force him out.
Earlier today, House Speaker Mike Johnson had this to say about President Biden and whether the 25th Amendment, this is something that's coming back around again now as part of this conversation, or the amendment focusing on presidential succession would be appropriate in this case. Let's listen.
In good conscience, if I was in the Biden cabinet, I would be wrestling with that question, because I would know what we all know now, that Joe Biden is not up to the task. Desperate times call for desperate measures. I think the 25th Amendment is appropriate here. I think the notion that the 25th Amendment would be appropriate here is something that most Republicans and, frankly, most Americans would agree with if they understood the process and how that works.
You covered the Trump White House as well. We've come full circle with this 25th Amendment conversation, haven't we?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, look, this is a Republican speaker looking to score some political points off of Joe Biden. One, I might mention, who got out-negotiated in a spending deal by someone who he believes is not mentally fit to be president. So, what does that say? But look, this is a clear indication that, this issue isn't going away. And
Clearly.
Biden can say, look, we're moving past this. We're going on to the nomination. But at heart, he's still an 81-year-old guy. He could have another lapse like he did at the debate. And once he becomes a nominee, there's nothing they can do. This is not like some sort of controversy you move past. It is Father Time who remains undefeated.
All right, Bloomberg's Jordan Fabian, thank you so much. Now, meantime, the NATO Summit is officially underway here in Washington, with world leaders gathering for the alliance's 75th anniversary. President Biden is set to address them momentarily, and we will bring you his remarks when they begin. First, though, joining us now is Bloomberg's Courtney McBride. So, Courtney, we are awaiting to see what President Biden has to say. What is he likely looking for in terms of tangible outcomes from this summit? What are any of the allied countries looking for?
Well, certainly Ukraine is the top priority and the focus of, I think, what we would consider the deliverables for the summit. The U.S. administration is really looking to provide a clear path toward membership for Ukraine. They've described it as a bridge, which our understanding is meant to be irreversible, including not just additional weapons for Ukraine, but efforts to shore up its defense industry and really to put it in a position to join NATO when conditions allow.
We heard from the Secretary of State earlier today. Antony Blinken said this about NATO's commitment to supporting Ukraine.
The aggression continues. Our commitment, and not just our commitment, the commitment of dozens of countries around the world to Ukraine and to its defense, that continues, and our commitment to Ukraine's success as a strong country. That continues, and that will be manifested in very concrete ways over the next couple of days at the NATO Summit.
That support, that commitment is already manifesting itself in some of your reporting when it comes to air defenses, our commitment to the F-16 program. How about these takeaways for Ukraine?
Certainly. The Ukrainians are constantly looking for additional defenses. We've seen Russian attacks, for instance, on a children's hospital this week. They are looking for more Patriot batteries to protect cities, to protect military installations.
Are they getting them?
the hope and the expectation is that they will get them, as the summit continues and allies come together. F-16s have been a long road in terms of providing the aircraft and getting the pilots trained, but that is something that is moving forward.
We'll keep our eyes on the terminal for your reporting this week. I know it's a big one for you. Great to have Courtney McBride with us as we open this NATO summit today in Washington, just as Fed Chair Jay Powell wraps his first day of 2 in testimony on Capitol Hill on the Senate side today before the Banking Committee, where he gave investors few clues about the timing of rate moves, but saying inflation is moving in the right direction.
Inflation has eased notably over the past couple of years. More good data would strengthen our confidence that inflation is moving sustainably toward 2%. The labor market appears to be fully back in balance. Labor market conditions have cooled considerably compared to where they were 2 years ago. We're well aware that we now face two-sided risks. If we loosen policy too late or too little, we could hurt economic activity. If we loosen policy too much or too soon, then we could undermine the progress on inflation. We continue to make decisions meeting by meeting. The likely direction does seem to be as we make more progress in inflation and as the labor market remains strong, we begin to loosen policy at the right moment.
Joining us now for more is Bloomberg's Amara Omeokwe. Amara, thanks for being back with us on this day one. Is this the dovish Powell you expected?
Well, I mean, we certainly did see a bit of a shift in Chairman Powell's comments today, a bit of a shift in tone. You know, for the last several weeks following the last Fed meeting, you saw Fed officials really talking about how they needed more confidence that inflation was moving down to their target before they cut. And you saw Chair Powell still saying that today, but you also saw him talking a lot more about the labor market, the signs of cooling that we've been seeing in the labor market, and how he and other Fed officials are increasingly taking that into account, right? The Fed has a dual mandate, both to control inflation and also promote maximum employment. And now that inflation has cooled a lot, they're focusing a lot more on what's happening in the labor market and signs of cracks that could be emerging.
Well, and we certainly heard Democrats today pressing Powell on whether those cracks are becoming more apparent and could merit a rate cut in the future. But that also begs the question of the timing around the election. That's something that Republican Senator Kevin Cramer warned Powell about. Take a listen.
Perception matters, and so I would just submit to you, and you haven't said you're going to do this. I don't have any reason to believe you'll do this, but any move to lower interest rates or move interest rates either direction before November 5th could certainly be a bad perception, even if there's a strong push to do that. I know you understand that, but I just want you to know that as long as you remain independent, I'll be on your side.
For our listeners on radio, you did see a moment there in which the chairman's eyebrows shot up. Amara, how does politics factor into Powell and the rest of the FOMC's thinking, if at all?
Well, you know, what Chair Powell has said, what many of the Fed officials have said, is that what they consider when setting policy is what is best for the economy, what is going to control inflation, what is going to make sure that Americans have jobs. They really have emphasized time and time again that they do not allow partisan politics to creep into their mission and influence what they're going to do. That being said, we are in an election year, and there are some economists, some Fed watchers who say, look, as we get closer to the election, it could be harder for the Fed to actually cut rates because of the fear of potentially looking political. Some Fed watchers talk about how, you know, the reality is politics are a part of what's happening in Washington and the optics surrounding the Fed. And so, the Fed says that they're insulated from that they don't consider it, but it is something that Fed watchers are talking about.
Well, it's kind of interesting as you consider the dual mandate here. I guess we got one of them in balance, as you mentioned earlier. But in terms of inflation, we've got an important report coming up on Thursday with CPI. At what point, Amara, do we call this a trend? Could Thursday be it?
Well, I think the inflation data recently has definitely been moving in the right direction. And you heard Chair Powell talk about that today, how the last two inflation reports have been good. But, you know, Fed officials aren't going to get overly excited about any one data point. They really have said that they want to see several good inflation reports before they become convinced that it's okay for them to cut rates, because you may remember in the first quarter of this year, we did start to see inflation data that was really discouraging, that looked like inflation could have been heating up again. And so, economists are expecting that the CPI report on Thursday will continue to show that inflation is moving in the right direction, but I don't think you should expect that to particularly move Fed officials at this point.